and non-SNAP households. Ultimately, the report found that about 40 cents of every food purchase dollar was spent on basic items like meat, fruits, vegetables, milk, eggs, and bread. Another 20 cents was spent on sweetened drinks, desserts, salty snacks, candy, and sugar. The remaining 40 cents was spent on a variety of items such as cereal, prepared foods, other dairy products, rice, beans, and other cooking ingredients. To be clear, when comparing spending on broad food categories, the data show that both SNAP and non-SNAP households make similar food choices. However, the report also confirms that there are differences in spending on individual food categories. One can also reasonably infer from the report that billions in taxpayer dollars are being spent on items like sweetened beverages and prepared desserts. This report, while not the sole basis of this hearing, begs the question of whether certain food or beverage items should be restricted as eligible food items in SNAP. While it's important to have this discussion, we can all agree that no one in America ought to go hungry. And SNAP is essential to providing nutrition to the most vulnerable citizens during tough times. Our goal is to provide much-needed nutrition and to encourage Americans to eat healthier. To that end, this committee has historically advocated for nutrition, education, and healthy eating incentive programs. Today, we'll consider whether additional restrictions should be added to that mix. Thank you again for the witnesses being here today. We look forward to your testimony. And I now turn to the ranking member for any comments that he would like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess we've had 16 hearings, and we're now taking a look at how SNAP recipients are purchasing food, or what kind of food they're purchasing with their SNAP dollars. Before we get too far, though, I think it's important to again note that the overwhelming theme of the testimony that we've heard last Congress was that while there are some areas for improvement, SNAP works. We heard testimony opposing efforts to block grant SNAP and on the importance of keeping SNAP within the Farm Bill. Those of us who've been around a while know that this is a complicated program, and I would urge members to keep that in mind as we begin work on the Farm Bill this next year. I don't think there's one single issue that's the problem, and I don't think there's one single solution that will magically somehow improve SNAP efficiency. Looking specifically at SNAP food choice, it would seem pretty straightforward that we not allow SNAP dollars to be spent on junk food. But the problem is, how do you define that? And that's something I took a look at when I was chairman. Minnesota, they tried this. Somehow or another, they got a waiver from FNS to disallow candy. And I don't know how they did this, but when they were defining candy, somehow or another, if the candy didn't contain wheat, it was banned. But if it did contain wheat, it wasn't. So a Kit Kat bar was okay under what they were doing, and a Hershey bar was not. So I don't know, I think when you go down this route, you're opening a real can of worms. And from what I can tell, talking to my folks back home, the grocery stores have really no interest in being the food police. And USDA has been resistant to this effort as well. And from what I know, when you look at how SNAP recipients, the kind of food they buy, it's really not different from the food that people that are not on SNAP. So I think the underlying issue is all of us in the United States do a bad job of deciding what to eat. And we could all use some guidance probably, but I'm not sure the government is the way to provide that. So I'm hopeful that we can be open-minded. The productive discussions on these issues can continue, and our efforts can continue, that we learn more about how SNAP actually works. And I look forward to hearing today's witnesses, and yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Chair would request that other members submit their opening statements for the record so witnesses may begin their testimony to ensure that there's ample time for questioning. I want to thank our panel for being here. It is by all arguments, some of the best people, the best informed folks, and it is a balanced palette. We have folks on both sides of the issue, and we have folks who have to administer the program, whatever it is we come up with. So we have a terrific panel, and I'm excited to hear from them after having read their testimony last night. We have, starting with Dr. Angela Rosidi. She's a research fellow, Poverty Studies, American Enterprise Institute here in Washington, D.C. We have Diane Whitmore Schanzenbach, Director, Hamilton Project, Senior Fellow, Economic Studies, the Brookings Institute here in D.C. We have Leslie Saracen, CEO of the Food Marketing Institute, Arlington, Virginia. We have Dr. John Wiedemann, who's the Deputy Executive Director, the Food Trust Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And we have Brian Wansink, the director of Cornell University Food and Brand Lab at Ithaca, New York. And given y'all's last names, I came sort of close to getting some of those right. So Dr. Ricidi, if you'll please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Conaway, Ranking Member Peterson, and other members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning on restrictions on purchases in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. My name is Angela Rashidi, and I am a research fellow in poverty studies at the American Enterprise Institute, or AEI. Prior to joining AEI, I was the Deputy Commissioner for Policy and Evaluation at the New York City Department of Social Services, or HRA. HRA administers SNAP, and during my time there, we provided benefits to almost 2 million people, 2 million New Yorkers each month. Most relevant for my testimony today is my experience drafting a proposal for a demonstration project in New York City to restrict the use of SNAP benefits to purchase sweetened beverages. Regrettably, it was denied by the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 2011. I will make 4 main points today. First, obesity and the related health problems remain one of the most challenging public health issues of our time, with sweetened beverages identified as one of the main contributors. 2, the integrity of SNAP as a publicly funded program rests on how well its implementation matches the stated goals of the program. 3, this problem is not unique to low-income households, but SNAP offers one opportunity for government to play a positive role. And 4, a demonstration project to test a restriction on sweetened beverages in SNAP is consistent with bipartisan efforts to support evidence-based policymaking. For my oral testimony, I won't go through all of the research on obesity, the related health problems, and its connection to sweetened beverages. But I do want to say, however, that obesity is a major public health crisis that affects all Americans, no matter their income status, and for this reason, it requires a multifaceted public health approach. High sweetened beverage consumption is not unique to SNAP households, but supporting such purchases, especially at the levels suggested in the data, directly contradicts the stated goals of the program. The Food Stamp Act of 1977 states that the goal is to provide for improved levels of nutrition among low-income households through a cooperative federal-state program of food assistance. This purpose holds today. For a program with a stated goal of improving nutrition, accepting such a large percentage of spending on beverages with no nutritional value seems counterintuitive and likely undermines public support for the program. Estimates suggest SNAP households spend almost 10% of their food budgets on these products. Allowing the purchase of sweetened beverages also directly competes with nutritional education programming, and it competes against costs associated with obesity, which sweetened beverages are a large contributor. And estimates suggest that obesity costs $147 billion per year. Placing restrictions on SNAP should be part of a broader approach to address this problem. Some believe that educating SNAP recipients on healthy eating is a better approach. I would argue that it should not be one or the other, and the USDA's own research supports this. The USDA's Healthy Incentive Program, which gave financial incentives to SNAP households to purchase fruits and vegetables, had no effect on sweetened beverage consumption, even though these households did eat more fruits and vegetables. The Summer EBT for Children program found that a WIC-based model, which provided restrictions, was more effective than a SNAP-based model, which did not allow restrictions. And another study not conducted through the USDA found that restrictions plus incentives was most effective in reducing sweetened beverage intake. As part of a broader approach toward evidence-based policymaking, a demonstration project is needed. I believe that with cooperation from the USDA and funding from Congress, a demonstration project is feasible. A random assignment experiment similar to the Healthy Incentive Pilot could be conducted. With the technology that exists today, this would not be overly burdensome on retailers. In fact, when we developed the proposal in New York City, we spoke to retailers, and they told us that it would not be that difficult to implement such a restriction since they program their EBT systems anyway. In conclusion, with a new Congress and administration, I am hopeful that a demonstration project in a few states be allowed in order to test whether a restriction could be effective. At a time when leaders of both parties are promoting evidence-based policymaking, testing such an idea and rigorously evaluating the results should receive broad support. Thank you, and I can respond to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Rashidi. Dr. Schatzenbach?
Thank you. Chairman Conaway, Ranking Member Peterson, and members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Diane Schanzenbach. I'm the director of the Hamilton Project, which is an economic policy initiative at the Brookings Institution. I'm also a professor of social policy and of economics at Northwestern University in Illinois. SNAP is a highly efficient and effective program. It lifted nearly 5 million children out of poverty in 2014. SNAP is targeted efficiently to families who need benefits the most. It reduces the likelihood that families have trouble affording food and serves as an automatic fiscal stabilizer in times of economic downturns. It also has extremely low rates of both error and fraud. A key reason for SNAP's success is that it relies on the private sector to provide efficient access to food through grocery stores and other retail outlets. The reliance on the program on the free market system has been a feature of SNAP since the beginning. With a few restrictions, recipients have been able to optimize which items to purchase and from which retail stores, subject to prevailing prices and also to their own taste preferences and nutritional needs. SNAP also has long-term benefits to children. My own recent research study, which is the only long-term causal study on SNAP access, found that those who had access to SNAP benefits during childhood were more likely to graduate from high school. They grew up to be healthier, and for women in particular, they grew up to be more economically self-sufficient as adults, all due to childhood access to SNAP benefits, because this is an investment in children. There's been much media discussion of the November 2016 USDA report on the typical food purchase patterns by SNAP participants and non-participants. The top line finding of that report is that SNAP and non-SNAP families have extremely similar spending patterns. The study did not address the more fundamental question, namely, how does SNAP change the types of groceries that participants buy? By increasing a family's resources available to purchase groceries, SNAP's expected to increase not only the quantity, but also the quality of foods purchased. SNAP families are able to buy more nutritious foods than they otherwise could not afford. Additional restrictions on SNAP purchases will undermine the effectiveness and the efficiency of the program. In particular, SNAP restrictions will be difficult to structure in practice. In the case of a proposed ban on the purchase of soft drinks or sweetened beverages, it will be unlikely to change consumption patterns. So recall that SNAP benefits are modest. They're approximately $4.50 per person per day. And as a result, almost everyone who participates in the program has to supplement their SNAP purchases with groceries purchased out of their own cash income. So what will happen if a soft drink purchase is banned using SNAP benefits? Well, we'd expect there to be no consumption change. A family can continue to purchase the same basket of goods. They'll just have to make certain at the checkout line to pay for the soft drinks out of their cash instead of their SNAP benefits. In other words, a ban will likely increase the administrative costs of the program, both to the USDA and to retailers, and increase the stigma faced by recipients when they use SNAP, but not have the benefit of actually inducing any behavioral changes. It will be all costs and no benefits. I think there are better policy options that are more likely to improve the diets of SNAP recipients. Market-based policies that reduce the relative price of healthy foods can increase that consumption. For example, as you know, the Healthy Incentives pilot in Massachusetts increased consumption of targeted healthy foods by 25%. Exploring ways to replicate or scale this type of program nationally would provide an effective and a market-based path forward toward achieving the goal of increasing healthy food consumption of SNAP recipients. Strengthening SNAP is a smart public investment that will improve both public health and economic growth. But banning certain foods will raise the administrative burdens and cost of the program, making it less efficient, but is unlikely to change consumption. By contrast, policy changes that strengthen the purchasing power of SNAP benefits and allow markets to function without undue interference are more likely to improve dietary choices of recipients and reduce food insecurity. Thank you, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you. Ms. Saracen, 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I'm Leslie Saracen. I serve as President and CEO of FMI. Our members' grocery stores are located in every congressional district in the country. Grocers play an important role in the efficient delivery of safe, affordable food for both the SNAP and the WIC programs. we appreciate this committee's work to better understand SNAP this morning. Becoming an authorized SNAP retailer is a complicated process. Retailers must submit specified paperwork and credentials and adhere strictly to the SNAP operating rules and ongoing training for their associates. Violation of SNAP operating rules results in revocation of both the SNAP and the WIC licenses. SNAP authorized stores code all products within the electronic checkout system as either SNAP eligible or ineligible. When an eligible item is scanned, the system deducts the product's price from the customer's SNAP EBT card. When an ineligible item is scanned, the cashier is prompted to ask the customer for another form of payment. Approximately 50% of SNAP transactions are multi-tendered, such that another form of payment is also used to pay for non-food items, ineligible items, or eligible food items that exceed the balance available on the SNAP EBT card. If a customer tries to purchase a tobacco or alcohol product with their SNAP EBT benefits, the electronic system will freeze until the product is actually removed. Within the electronic systems, WIC-eligible items are charged against that benefit first, followed by those eligible for SNAP, and finally, the cashier must collect another form of payment, cash, check, debit, or credit for all remaining items. Grocery transactions for SNAP customers vary significantly throughout the month. Data indicate the first transaction of the month is usually the largest and may contain larger quantities of protein and perishables. By the last week of the month, customers typically purchase maximum calories at minimum cost. We appreciate the committee's recognition of the role grocers play in the SNAP program. FMI has announced a new industry SNAP task force to identify areas where the program works well and also to consider those that may require improvement. Some suggest that limiting what customers can buy with SNAP, making it more like WIC, may help achieve these goals. Doing so would place a tremendous burden, both on USDA and on food retailers, and likely would not achieve policy goals. Please consider two recent examples from the WIC program. When USDA began the Fresh Fruits and Vegetables Cash Value Voucher Program, it subjectively decided all fresh fruits and vegetables were eligible except white potatoes. As many of you will recall, this ban on white potatoes unleashed a great debate throughout Congress and the industry. In the end, after more than a year of debate and consideration of actual science, USDA reversed the ban to allow white potatoes to be purchased through WIC. This was one item out of the tens of thousands found in each of our member stores that would have to be studied and debated before USDA can make a determination as to whether a product is in or out. Second, if our goal with SNAP is to provide short-term lifelines to needy Americans so they can get and keep a job to earn enough to support their families without government benefits, such limitations seem unlikely to help accomplish that goal at a reasonable cost. Doing so will require additional USDA staff to make these decisions for all products currently in market, as well as the estimated 20,000 new products introduced every year. USDA would also need to maintain a real-time list downloadable to every electronic payment system in the country. I should note that in 2004, Congress directed USDA to create an electronically downloadable real-time UPC database for all WIC-eligible foods. Today, retailers are still waiting for this list. The fact that nearly 13 years later we're still waiting for the list shows the complexity of creating and keeping one updated in real time, even for a list of products as small as WIC's. A similar SNAP database would include more than 100 times the number of products, along with more than the 20,000 that are introduced every year. Could it be done? Probably so, but we expect it would be both challenging and expensive. Finally, FMI members are incredible contributors to their communities. They're the largest contributors to our nation's food banks, create good-paying jobs, and help build our future workforce. We look forward to working with the committee on SNAP and other related issues, and I'm also happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Dr. Weideman, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Conaway and Ranking Member Peterson, for inviting me to testify. My name is John Weideman. I'm Deputy Executive Director for the Food Trust, Pennsylvania-based nonprofit working nationally to improve access to healthy food. This year, through a grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, we've launched the Center for Healthy Food Access, a national collaborative effort aimed at improving the health of children. I'm here today to talk about strategies the Food Trust has been employing to improve health and encourage healthy eating among SNAP participants. We believe that to have the greatest impact, it takes a comprehensive approach that includes access, education, and incentives. In Pennsylvania, we've been improving access by opening farmers markets, working with corner stores to stock healthier products, and incentivizing new supermarket development. Our team of nutrition educators is providing engaging programming through SNAP Ed to teach children and adults how to eat healthy, cook, and shop on a budget. And we run a successful Food Bucks program that provides $2 worth of free produce for every $5 spent with SNAP at farmers markets and a local supermarket. Based on research, this comprehensive approach is working. A peer-reviewed study published in the journal Pediatrics found that our SNAP Ed program reduced childhood overweight by 50%. More recently, data collected on the BMI of Philadelphia children is showing that after decades of rising childhood obesity rates, we're finally seeing them drop. The strategies that are being implemented, access to healthy food, nutrition education, SNAP incentives, are happening all around the country, and they are not only changing eating habits and preventing diet-related disease, but they're also creating jobs and spurring economic development. I want to share a brief story about Nicole Speller, a participant in one of our free 6-week SNAP Ed cooking workshops that take place in over 500 community sites across southeastern Pennsylvania. Nicole had decided to make a change and improve her health. She also happened to be a fantastic cook, and each week she would share the recipe she was learning with her neighbors and her church. Upon completing the workshop series, Nicole started her own healthy cooking class at her church. This is just one example of how SNAP Ed is helping to create a culture of health, and it's happening in innovative ways in every state in the nation. Of course, understanding how to eat healthy is only part of the problem. Accessing healthy food continues to be a challenge for millions of Americans. Over the last decade, we've seen incredible success through public-private partnerships to incentivize grocery stores to meet the need for better access. In Pennsylvania, through the leadership of now Congressman Dwight Evans, we have the Pennsylvania Fresh Financing Initiative, which funded 88 grocery store projects in urban and rural areas and created 5,000 jobs. Based on this successful model, there's now the federal HFFI and programs in many other states. Most recently, through Governor Kasich's Ohio Fresh Food Program, Vinton County, a rural county in southeast Ohio, is now slated for a new grocery store to open after the only store in the entire county had previously closed. This store will now serve seniors and working families who've been unable to satisfy the very basic human need of going to the store to buy food. The same grocers who we work with on HFFI programs also stress the need of the importance of nutrition education. It makes sense. If grocers open a store and stock it with fresh produce, they need nutrition education to drive demand for healthy food. This is why both access and education go hand in hand, not only to drive better health outcomes, but also to ensure that stores are profitable and serve as economic anchors. Lastly, I want to discuss incentives that help make healthy choices more affordable. In Philadelphia, 73% of Philly Food Bucks users report eating more fruits and vegetables. And SNAP sales at our farmers markets have increased 300% since we launched the program. In Michigan, the Double Up Food Bucks program is available throughout the state at farmers markets and supermarkets. And around the country, hospitals are now participating in Veggie RX programs, allowing physicians to prescribe fruits and vegetables to low-income patients. The USDA FINI program has supported the expansion of these SNAP incentive programs. Making healthier food more affordable makes it easier for low-income families to make healthier choices. Many parents might try putting a plate of fresh carrots in front of a toddler. If he doesn't like it, they can just fix him something else to eat. But imagine if you only have enough money to afford one plate of food. The decision to try new things becomes much more difficult. In closing, there's no silver bullet to prevent diet-related disease like obesity and diabetes, but the costs are real. A recent study calculated the cost of diet-related disease at $427 billion. A comprehensive approach that combines access, nutrition education, and incentives, and includes public-private partnerships holds the most promise for stemming these rising healthcare costs. Congress has moved forward to address obesity and diabetes through innovative programs like SNAP Ed, FINI, and HFFI. SNAP is the foundation of this comprehensive approach. It keeps millions of families from going hungry, and it's a critical economic pillar in low-income urban and rural communities. Without SNAP, stores would close, jobs would be lost, families would go hungry, and it would increase need for food stamps. By a vicious cycle if there ever was one. But by expanding access to healthy food, nutrition education, and SNAP incentives in the next Farm Bill, we can improve health, increase revenues for American farmers, create jobs in urban and rural areas, and control rising health care costs. Thank you for asking me to testify.
Thank you very much. Dr. Wansing?
To shop healthier, and 3, how can this best be encouraged? Thank you. First, as a behavioral scientist and director of the Cornell Food and Brand Lab, I focus on changing behaviors in a practical way. But as former USDA executive director for the Center for Nutrition Policy and Promotion, the dietary guidelines, I focused on changing eating behaviors in a scalable way. What I want to emphasize is our best and worst eating habits start in the grocery store. If we can change what people bring home, we change what they eat. Now, how does what food restrictions influence people? Well, they have 2 exhibits. First, how does shopping behavior change after versus before people receive SNAP benefits? Well, there's a new 6-year study of SNAP recipients in Rhode Island, and it shows that spending on SNAP-eligible products went up once they received the benefits, but the general purchase of SNAP-ineligible benefits, the soft drinks, things like this, did not go down. Okay? What they do is they trace some of this to people buying more convenient products when they get SNAP benefits. Exhibit 2 looks at incentives. When we specifically financially incentivize shoppers to buy more fruits and vegetables, what happens? In one 6-month study of 208 families in Utica, New York, we gave shoppers a 10% bonus, 10% more money back on a debit card when they bought healthy foods like fruits and vegetables. When low-income shoppers were given this, they spent $33 more per week, with 12 of that being on healthier foods, but 21 being on less healthy foods, such as snack foods. The money they saved on healthy foods, they also spent on less healthy foods. Now, these are both preliminary reports. They do show that when people are incentivized to buy healthy foods, they do, but they also buy less healthy foods. But what I want to look at is who has the biggest potential to eat better. And we make a mistake when we only look at all SNAP recipients as a homogeneous group of shoppers. Instead, people are in a pyramid like this. We call it a hierarchy of health predisposition. If you see something like this, there are people at the top who are very vigilant shoppers. These are people who know the number of calories in a Coke, the number of calories in a Fritos. They care about what they shop. No change is going to influence what they buy. At the very bottom, we have health disinterested shoppers. Again, these are people who they're either resigned or they're disinterested in shopping healthier. And again, no change is going to have much impact on what they buy. But who we can influence is this middle group, the health predisposed shoppers. These are people who want to eat better, but they just need the help and the nudge to do so. Now, if we look at what's going to work best for these health predisposed shoppers, the question is, how do we do this? Will restriction work? And second, will something else work better? Now, as said earlier, it's not clear whether the hassles of related to retail and shopper dignity would merit a change, but there might be a solution to this. So, for instance, one option would be to give a SNAP recipient an option. They could use 100% of their SNAP benefits to purchase whatever they wanted, or if they agreed themselves to restrict things, let's just say to produce, maybe they get a bonus. They get 125% more. Now, we're not sure how this would work, and it does merit testing, as mentioned earlier. But a second option is far easier to implement and can be scaled very quickly. It involves providing simple guidelines to retailers, maybe even a certification on how to make it easier for SNAP shoppers, all shoppers, to buy healthier foods by making it more convenient, attractive, and normal to do so. There's a precedent for this healthier by design shopping program that's beginning to work in food deserts. Last year, the National Association of Convenience Stores developed and launched a new toolkit of evidence-based tactics that could be used to increase the sales of healthier foods. It's one reason why when you buy gas, you often find a basket of bananas next to the cash register. It's because of this program. These are small, easy changes to make, and they're win-win benefits for both retailers, SNAP recipients, and us. but systematically giving other retailers the guidance on how to make these healthy nudges and credit them for doing so would benefit SNAP shoppers just as well as benefiting us. In Norway, this retail program is underway as the Nordic solution to sustainability and obesity. It's related to the Eat Foundation and Green Nudge. And over there, supermarkets are being guided to make small changes in signage, service, and structure as increased fruits and vegetables for lot. Now, in summary, this is a third alternative, but I'll give three things. SNAP benefits, SNAP recipients get benefits and restricted benefits, but they do not necessarily buy only healthier food, they buy everything else. Second, there are three segments of shoppers. And third, there are different ways to best encourage this health predisposed segment. Thanks for this opportunity to present with you.
Again, thank our panel. Terrific. I'm going to remind our members that I'm going to be relatively strict with the 5-minute clock in order to try to get everybody through the system. So if you want to use most of your 5 minutes to make editorial comments and ask a question with a second left on the clock, I'll ask our witnesses to submit the answer to for the record. So just to try to fair to be everybody. So with that, I'll recognize the chairman of the Subcommittee on Nutrition for his 5 minutes. GT.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members of the panel, for everything that you do, supporting the nutritional needs of American families. Greatly appreciated. This is such a great topic, obviously one that I'm passionate about. You know, we're looking at how Americans find themselves, and Americans who find themselves, American families, individuals, a lot of children, find themselves in some pretty challenging financial circumstances, get access to nutrition. Certainly in addition to personal resources and family support, community programs, and obviously our TFAB program and other ways that this committee supports those community programs. And then we have SNAP, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. And I think this is an appropriate place to have this discussion. Quite frankly, I think this is an appropriate jurisdiction when you look, because number one, two basic principles. Nutrition matters in so many different ways. And number two, it's farmers feed. And so my first question is to the gentleman from the Keystone State, Mr. Weidman. It's good to see you, and thank you for being here today, and congratulations, the Food Trust's 25th anniversary. We appreciate all that your organization does to improve access for those in need to affordable and nutritious food. Now, your testimony mentions that in Pennsylvania, nutrition education programming is in both urban and rural environments. How does, I represent the Pennsylvania 5th District. Obviously, in this topic, I'm, concerned with, all Americans, but in the 5th District, which is very rural, by definition, 24% of the landmass of Pennsylvania. How does SNAP education reach into those rural areas?
Thank you, Congressman Thompson. So in Pennsylvania, we have a great SNAP Ed program. There's a little variability from state to state in how the program is operated. In Pennsylvania, it's led by Penn State, and they do a great job because of the extension program. They have a lot of breadth to cover rural areas, and so we have stuff happening in almost every county in Pennsylvania. And it's similar to the work that we're doing in Pennsylvania. So working with children, working with adults to get them to to learn more about where food comes from, how to sometimes nutrition science can be confusing, I think, to all of us. So helping them kind of guide them to make good choices of the food around them. One of the programs we do, we work with is a Share Our Strength program called Cooking Matters in the Supermarket. So it's really taking seniors and other adults on tours of a grocery store, literally, and teaching them about how to shop healthy, how to shop on a budget. And this kind of work's happening all around the country. There's a great rural example of SNAP Ed happening in New Mexico, the Chili Plus program, and that's doing work in Head Start centers as well as pre-K, working with kids and their families basically to help them, again, guide them on making healthier choices, teaching them how to cook healthy recipes, taste tests, and that's happening on tribal lands as well in New Mexico, in addition to other sites. I think it's about 80 sites, all in rural areas of New Mexico. And I'm sure there's plenty of other examples. So yeah, I think SNAP Ed is a great way to get at both this problem of improving health in urban and rural communities.
It seems like from the testimony and past discussions I've had with key stakeholders and folks that this is making sure that nutritional needs are met is really strengthened by a collaborative process. And obviously with programs like SNAP-Ed, food insecurity, nutrition incentives, healthy food financing initiative, all those. Can you expand just in the short time we have on other types of collaboratives, other folks who step to the table? You mentioned my alma mater, Great Land Grant University, Penn State. Other examples of collaboratives and you know,
Sure.
That seems like a model we should continue to strengthen.
Yeah, I think there's great examples of collaboratives. A lot with the grocers. We work with a great local grocery chain in Pennsylvania called the Fresh Grocer. And the Fresh Grocer is partnering with us to provide a space for doing nutrition education, SNAP-Ed programming in their stores. As Brian said, these stores are a great place to meet customers where they shop and kind of help guide them to make healthier choices. That same grocer is also helping us with SNAP incentives, doing our Philly Food Bucks inside the Fresh Grocer. Every time a customer spends $5, the grocer was one that created the whole technology to put out a coupon, an electronic coupon for $2 in free fruits and vegetables at that store. And I think, again, this is something that's really we're seeing nationally. Great partners with grocers, with farmers, certainly at all of our farmers markets in Pennsylvania and around the country have been great partners. I also just quickly would mention that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce today in D.C. is having a conference called the Health Means Business Conference, and they are recognizing partnerships between nonprofits and the corporate sector aimed at improving health. GSK has funded a citywide initiative called Get Hype Philly, working to get youth to be leaders in making healthy changes in their community. So we're working with 9 other nonprofits and 50,000 kids in Philadelphia with GSK. And then Campbell Soup Foundation in Camden, New Jersey, is midway through a 10-year initiative working with a number of groups to improve health and childhood
That's
obesity.
great, Mr. Wyman. Thank you. I see my time has expired.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Mr. Scott, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This whole issue to me strikes right at the nerve of the foundation of our great country, which is founded on the principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And there's no other area of human endeavor that best manifests our foundation of life, of liberty, and happiness than our choice of food. Think of what makes you happy. I know there are many things out there individually that make us happy, but none greater than food. And what bothers me with this is that we want to make subjections here that are just absolutely not true. I mean, sodas, candy, sweet things, that's not what makes us obese. It is the lack of our children exercising. I mean, look at the history of this country. Look at us 30 years ago, 20 years ago. What has happened? Our children and us, we don't go and exercise. We don't have physical education in the schools anymore. But what we have is this BlackBerry, this Facebook, this going on the internet. And instead of children going and say, let's go play basketball or let's hook up a game here, they go in the basement or they go in their room and they stay hour after hour on that. My whole point is this. Food surveillance violates the basic principles of this great country. And first of all, you're going to discriminate between a low-income person simply because he has to, for 6 months on an average, That's all they stay on, food stamps. They're gone. Look at the complexity you're going to put into the grocery store. Who's going to pick up that extra cost to have the police, the food police there monitoring? And why? Now, I think that a better way of going about solving many of these things is to look at how we educate people. You can't force them, you can't deny them their freedoms to be able to make choices without violating their pursuit of happiness. Think about it. When Thomas Jefferson wrote those words, he said to himself, and he wrote in one particular pamphlet, and he wrote this to his arch competitor, Alexander Hamilton. And what he said was, in this way, he said, "What I have declared here, my dear Mr. Hamilton, has come to me," these words, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. He said, "by some divine providence intervention." In other words, what he was saying was, those words, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, he came and he wrote that Declaration of Independence under the inspiration of God Almighty. Let us not go against that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Crawford, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a tough act to follow, Mr. Scott. Appreciate that. I represent a part of the country, the Delta region, probably better than half of my district. And as you can imagine, we're confronted with a high degree of poverty. So many of my constituents are heavily dependent on SNAP benefits. And the problem they confront is that over the years, we've seen a decline in the number of supermarkets. So what we're dealing with ultimately here, ironically, is one of the most productive agricultural regions in the country is effectively a food desert. We have limited access to healthy food, so we rely on convenience stores and things like that. So if we're to restrict SNAP purchases to healthier food products, my question is, would the compliance costs outweigh the benefits of accepting SNAP benefits at retail locations, or would it encourage SNAP retailers to offer a wider variety of healthy food products? And I'll just leave that to any or all that want to make a comment on that.
I think it depends, frankly, on how any changes to the program were structured. Obviously, retailers want very much to be in areas where they can meet customer needs. And if the customer base is there and they can profitably and successfully meet the needs locally, they will and they want to. I think the kinds of proposals that we're talking about here will definitely have an impact on how these companies can function. The potential increase in the administrative costs for a program that limits certain products, whatever they are, whatever kind of products we're talking about, is going to be oppressive, as I indicated in my testimony, given the sheer volume of products that are available in supermarkets today and the number of new products that are introduced every year. The creation of a structure to monitor that and determine which products are in and which ones are out are going to necessarily create pressure on the system and also create pressure at the retail level for stores that are in existence, for stores that are being contemplated to be created. And the result could be that stores can't function profitably any longer in some areas. It could also be that some stores will have to determine that the administrative costs are so great that they would have to leave the SNAP program entirely.
Thank you. I would echo that I would be particularly concerned that these increased regulatory burdens would drive out some of the smaller retailers in especially rural areas. The other thing I would like to add is that, as an economist, I think all of this comes down to supply and demand. And I've heard a lot of conversation about how do we increase the demand for healthy foods, whether that's through education, whether that's through pricing incentives. And I think that, if people demand more healthy foods in those areas, those grocery stores are going to respond by supplying more of them. So that's why I'd like to see the market work in this and not restrict.
And I would just agree with you of the need for more grocery stores in the Delta. We're working with the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation and Hope Enterprises located in Jackson, Mississippi, to incentivize more grocery stores to come to the Delta region. I also think the USDA, or through the Farm Bill, the Healthy Food Financing Initiative offers real opportunities to bring more grocery stores to the region.
Thanks. Dr. Rashidi, you want to weigh in on that?
Sure, and just real quickly, I think if you placed restrictions on a very, very narrowly defined product, such as sweetened beverages, it would not be overly burdensome for retailers. And I agree that it's really a supply and demand issue. So if you did a restriction on sweetened beverages, for example, which drove up demand for healthier products, because that's all people could use their SNAP benefits for, you would hope that the retailers would then respond by providing more healthy options.
Can I get in on that? And just respectfully, we think based on economic theory that that's not what will happen. This restriction, because so many people are using both SNAP benefits and their own cash, won't actually change behavior.
And if I could also respond to that, I think we end up on a slippery slope when we start talking about sweet beverages, because I don't know what that means, and I think, like most things, the devil's in the details, because when we start talking about sweetened beverages, I don't know what exactly we're talking about. There are juices that bring lots of nutrition that are sweetened beverages. There are yogurt drinks that bring all kinds of nutrients to the consumers of them that also have sugar in them. So I think we need to be careful about how we're discussing these, because we're talking about a category of products as if we all understand what that means.
Thank you. My time expired.
Gentleman's time expired. Mr. McGovern, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Well, I think it's safe to say that we all can make better choices and healthier choices, SNAP recipients and non-SNAP recipients. The cost of avoidable health care costs that taxpayers pay for non-SNAP recipients who make bad choices. They get diabetes, heart disease. We all need to do better. And but I don't think by limiting the choices of SNAP recipients you get there. In fact, Ms. Rashidi said that we have a new president. Maybe this is a time to try a pilot project. So when you said that, I Googled Donald Trump's eating habits. And it's not a pretty picture. Domino's Pizza, Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's, Diet Cokes. Maybe we ought to begin with a pilot project that limits access to unhealthy foods at the White House, because we all pay for that. The taxpayers pay for that. But I think that if we're serious about this, ought to be a bigger discussion. And one of the things we ought not to do, and this is out of this committee's purview, is limit the nutrition, is cut back on the nutritional standards of the school feeding programs, which some have suggested. We ought to figure out, things that have worked. I visited a place in Dorchester, Massachusetts called Daily Table. They provide access to nutritional foods at a lower cost. A lot of these vegetables and foods would otherwise be discarded by other grocery stores. But people go there and they can afford, to be able to make healthier choices. I personally think that one of the things that we could do is increase the SNAP benefit. It's about $1.40 per person per meal. You can't make a lot of choices in general with that kind of benefit. Research from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities found that increasing SNAP benefits by a mere $30 per month would lower food insecurity, decrease fast food consumption, and increase vegetable consumption. We've seen the Healthy Incentives pilot, which found that an ongoing investment of less than 15 cents per person per day may result in 25% increase in fresh fruit and vegetable consumption. And out of this pilot came the Finney grants, which are working across the country to incentivize healthy eating, all very positive stuff. I've been to SNAP education programs, and I'll be honest with you, the critique I get from some who attend these programs is that the ability to buy the stuff to have a healthier diet, is difficult because in their neighborhoods they don't have supermarkets. They have to rely on these convenience stores, and so there's a lot of issues here that we need to talk about. I think in our school programs we ought to stress nutrition education at an earlier age. I think it's a lot easier to kind of get people on a healthy pathway when they're younger. But let me ask Ms. Shazenbach, I mean, do you support increasing SNAP benefits? Do you think that would help promote healthy eating?
I think there's good evidence that an increase in SNAP benefits would increase consumption of healthy foods. Just like was testified earlier, when people are really have really tight budgets, they concentrate on getting the lowest cost calories. And then, if we expand, purchasing power, over time, then people will increase both the quantity and the quality of foods that they're eating. So I think we've got really good evidence from the summer feeding program, the summer EBT program that says, additional resources improve nutrition outcomes. And similar, this work that you cited from the Center on Budget suggests that additional, $30 per month would change how people eat, make them consume more healthy foods.
Right, and I agree with Ms. Saracen said about, how do you define a sweetened beverage? I mean, does cranberry juice fall into that category? I mean, there's lots of nutritional benefits to cranberry juice, but, it's a sweetened beverage. And, would you take that off the list? And again, I mean, from, my experience talking to people on SNAP, again, a lot of times it comes down to the affordability as well as the access. Again, we have lots of pilot programs going on all across the country. You mentioned what's going on in Pennsylvania, all very, very positive stuff. We ought to understand that that's how you do it, not by going in and telling somebody, that we're going to restrict your choices. I think that's something we ought not to be doing here in Washington. And but if you want to do a pilot program, I'm happy to co-sponsor one at the White House because I'm worried about our president's eating habits right now. So thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Lamothe, 5 minutes. Mr. Lamothe for 5 minutes. You pass. Mr. Davis, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Lamothe. I appreciate that. It's always actually great to follow my colleague, Mr. McGovern, and outside of the comments about the president's eating habits, I actually agree with him on some of these issues that, maybe we ought to look at incentives. Maybe we ought to, having this debate is great for all of us because this isn't a partisan issue. I would challenge my colleague, Mr. McGovern, to go to some of those restaurants that he named, and I believe he's going to be able to find that he can make healthy choices at every single one of those restaurants. And that's what's great about what we've seen in our country and our access to healthy foods. The marketplace is demanding healthier choices, and all of those restaurants that he mentioned have so many more today at a very much more affordable cost than what they had even 5-10 years ago. So the marketplace is actually helping to supply that demand for healthier choices. And I agree with Mr. McGovern. I don't think that we have a role here in being the food police. And he mentioned some critics of the school nutrition program. Yeah, I'm one of those. And it's because the lunch ladies tell me stories about how kids are throwing food away that they're not eating. We don't have an adequate supply of healthy food to serve on our school lunches that tastes good. Kids are throwing it away. So how do we fix that? We do it by actually offering more healthier choices, but in a way that's less of a top-down approach. Maybe incentivize it. It's great to see so much testimony about expanding purchasing options. I was a big supporter of the Double Bucks program in the last Farm Bill. And Mr. Wansing, I was actually leaving to go to another hearing, but listening to your testimony, and you talked about how do we have more incentives? What can we do to incentivize rather than punish? Because I don't drink cranberry juice. Sorry, it's probably good for me, Jim. I don't drink it. It tastes like syrup to me. I can't handle the sugar content in it. But if I was a SNAP beneficiary, would I be able to buy cranberry juice and not what I live off of Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi? I mean, who's going to make that choice? It's got 0 calories. Actually, cranberry juice has a lot more sugar and a lot more calories. So I don't know who's going to make those choices, and frankly, I haven't seen the federal government be a good barometer of making choices like that for the constituents that I serve. But Mr. Watson, can you tell us what type of incentive program would you recommend?
Thank you very much. Well, if we can use schools as a parallel, as brought up, one of the ways that we found that it's best to guide kids to eat healthier in schools is not necessarily nutrition education programs, because they're very costly, they're tough to get into schools, but instead simply making the healthier products more convenient, more attractive, and more normal. Having a basket of apples next to the checkout line, putting signs to make foods taste better, reduced waste, and it also increases how much people eat. And there's 29,000 schools who are now in that program. Now, a similar thing can be done in the stores. And you were right spot on when you said anybody who goes in these restaurants could eat healthy, because there's the options that are now cheaper than they used to be. But making simple changes in grocery stores that are incentive compatible with the grocery stores, that are either profit neutral or profitable for them.
Haven't they already been doing that?
Not as widespread. I took last year off and I went on sabbatical to implement this in Norway to show that it could be done as a test of concept. And even making small changes in these grocery stores, simply having things such as having fruits and vegetables within 10 feet of the doorway increases how much people take by 3%. But making these changes are things that grocery stores find profitable, but then also benefits all of us, not just SNAP beneficiaries.
But you wouldn't make the government force the stores to change?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No, we'd make the profit argument to them that they can make more money making people healthier.
Okay, because I know some stores would have to actually move their Starbucks out of the way to get within that 10 feet of the door. Does anybody else on the panel want to address the incentivization?
If I could just say that, sort of apart from the incentive part of it, the thing that retailers are doing is a lot of this stuff is happening on their own without incentives. Our most recent data shows that something in the neighborhood of 95% of our member companies have nutritionists and dietitians on site in their stores or at their corporate headquarters helping direct what's going on with their customers in education. So there's a lot of this stuff that's happening even without the incentives.
Thank you. My time's expired.
Time expired. Ms. Lujan Grisham, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank my colleagues, Mr. McGovern and Mr. Davis. The focus of all of our conversations ought to be on the incentives, and I don't want to lose momentum, and we do really want very specific ideas. In my state, we've got incentives and initiatives that are both authorized and supported by the Farm Bill, and many of those that are, solely state or corporate, private-public partnership initiatives. We've got programs at WIC, we've got programs at Head Start. We're uniquely focused on SNAP education. We've got a program called Chili. For those of you not from New Mexico, we are the leaders in the best tasting New Mexico chili anywhere. And so, in fact, our state question, I think, is whether red or green. But it's the Child Health Initiative for Lifelong Eating and Exercise. And it really is focused, this sort of integrated both purchasing and education and cooking and eating healthy that we've pushed out into the rural areas. The core issue is that we want the flexibility for states and rural communities and communities to really figure out how to do it. But we need the Farm Bill to be really clear that there's not only those incentives in terms of authorizations, but there is funding and incentives for those funding vehicles. Because look, I did the SNAP challenge, $30. So I just had a protein shake. I really think, as nearly a 60-year-old woman with a fairly sedentary public policy lifestyle, I'm really proud of, I try to be cognizant of my calorie intakes. I work very hard at it. Well, during my SNAP challenge, I wasn't so good at it, all right? I ate ramen noodles. I ate, I'm trying to think of the other high carbohydrate kinds of foods. I tried to get peanut butter, but high fat, because I couldn't get the one that, and I couldn't get any organics. So I got one banana and I got one apple for my weekly benefit, if I was going to have enough food at $1.50. Now, if I'm dealing with average benefits for my whole family, and God forbid somebody in your family is sick, and they say, we want high iron, high protein, you got a teenager who's playing football, you cannot, with that SNAP benefit, you can try all you want to do healthy foods. It is impossible because unhealthy, cheaper foods are all you can buy. And I ate it. I stayed true to doing what I was supposed to do, but it wasn't good. So if we don't deal with that, in my state, seniors are about to get their SNAP benefits cut. It's $33. $33 a month with the state portion that they're going to cut. I don't know about you. I'm a caregiver for my mom. If I go to the grocery store for $33, I can't get anything that she ought to be eating. Anything. So if we don't increase SNAP education funding, and we don't really put resources to allow folks to do these incentives, we can talk about how great they are all the time, and they are. I agree with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. We really shouldn't be the food police. We ought to do incentives. We ought to do something about obesity. You do something about obesity, you've got hundreds of millions of dollars to put back into economic incentives and farm bill incentives to grow better food and to do more in the areas that we all care about on this committee. How can you get us, one of the most bipartisan committees, to really think long and hard about putting the resources where they need to be and seeing the evidence-based outcomes that we've got the research. The chairman teases me about research all the time. We've got the research that shows us that you have to educate people. Do you have ideas to help us get to that agreement about making sure that there are the resources that allow us to do the things that would make a difference?
I believe if we want to change things really quick, it's probably not going to be education. It's a nice long-term solution, but it's going to take a long time, and it's not going to be the payoff. I think initially educating, in this case, retailers as to what they could do to guide people to these healthier, which are also high-margin foods because they have to throw them away. If a banana goes bad, a retailer loses money on it. What they can do to guide people to these and get people to buy more of them is not just going to benefit SNAP recipients, but it's going to benefit all of us.
Anybody else? I got 10 seconds. Let's go.
Just real quickly, there's really little evidence that I'm in favor of incentive programs, but there's little evidence that incentive programs reduce consumption of unhealthy foods. And so I advocate for both. And I think, so if you look at the integrity of the program, I think you could gain support for increasing incentive programs and education if you eliminate some of these other issues like allowing unhealthy foods to be purchased from the program.
My time is definitely up, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Comer, 5 minutes. Mr. Comer, 5 minutes.
I was Commissioner of Agriculture in Kentucky for 4 years, and one of the things that worked really well for us with being able to provide healthy options to people with EBT cards was when I first got elected, we only had 21 farmers markets that took EBT cards. And when we went out of office, all 225 farmers markets took EBT cards. And a lot of people said, well, that'll never be a factor in sales. In a lot of those farmers markets, it was over 25% of the sales were from EBT cards because of food desert and access to healthy food. The farmers markets are a great way, a great option for people on SNAP because there are no bad foods at a farmer's market, or I've never seen candy or soft drinks or anything sold at any Kentucky farmer's market. So I just wanted to share that story. That was a pretty successful way to get healthy food options to people that need it because of the obesity problem that we clearly have. Shifting gears here, what percentage of people use their entire monthly SNAP benefits during the first week of the month? Does anybody know the answer to that?
I don't know the percentage, but I can tell you that the data that we've seen shows that a tremendous amount of it is done in the first week, and that those purchases tend to be the largest of the month.
Right.
And the ones that have the most protein and the things that we would tend to expect that they would buy first.
In talking to my retailers across the state about this issue, several have come up with this suggestion, and they've used this example. The majority of the people that they deal with use their entire benefit, monthly benefit, the first week of the month. So if you want to provide milk and things like that, meat for low-income people to eat healthy, if this is their only source of revenue for their food, the milk expires or it's gone. They don't have access to milk or a lot of proteins that expire. Would it be possible? I just wonder how feasible it would be to have a bi-monthly benefit to encourage more people to try to manage their budgets to where they can have milk for the first half of the month and the second half of the month, because it's a big problem. I represent a very poor district, and that's something that just about every retailer that I've talked to has mentioned that as a suggestion to be more efficient and to help the people, because a lot of the people, unfortunately, don't have a high level of financial literacy, and that's an issue. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, Ms. Saracen.
As a Kentuckian myself, and from the next county over from you, I can totally understand the discussions that you've had. And what we find in many states is that they have gone to not having single dates of the month when the benefits are available, that there are multiple points in the month when recipients have access to their benefits. And so in the states where that's happened, it's been very beneficial, I think, certainly from the retail perspective, because it allows us, instead of having to have such pressure on both our labor pool on a certain day or in a certain week of the month, but also on the supply chain issues, so that we have enough milk in different quantities and different styles and different sizes, for example. Being able to move these things out over the course of the month would certainly, from a retail perspective, be a better situation for us.
Yeah, I'm for less government, and I don't like the nanny state and all of that, but it's clearly a problem, and you know, the obesity issue, it's almost at epidemic levels. The poorer the county, the higher the obesity rate, and you can see that when you go in the public schools and look at unfortunately look at the students in the poorer schools. You can just tell there's a higher obesity rate in those schools.
A couple of things. One is the data seem to indicate that everybody's getting fat, rich kids, poor kids alike. But to answer, to give my perspective on your question about the twice a month, something that people raise as a concern there is, especially for people with limited access to places to shop, breaking this benefit up into twice a month might make it harder for them to get to the store, because now instead of one big shopping trip, they have to do multiple. Mm-hmm. So that's just something to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time expired. Ms. Adams, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Peterson, for hosting the hearing, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. The SNAP program is very important to those in the 12th District of North Carolina. I represent that district, and the folks struggle with food insecurity a lot. We have a lot of food deserts. But as someone who lives with diabetes, I know that there will be times when someone that participates in the SNAP program and has diabetes will need to buy a candy bar to quickly raise their blood sugar, and they should be able to buy that candy bar with their SNAP benefits. Dr. Schrazenbach, could you provide a brief summary of the findings of your research on the long-term health impacts on individuals who participated in SNAP as infants and toddlers.
Thank you. Yes, so my recent research study looked at the introduction of the food stamp program, which was done over the 1960s and 70s. Congress, in its great wisdom, decided to roll it out slowly, and so that gives us an opportunity to study, you know, if you lived in this county when you were 5 years old versus that county, you had different access to the food stamp program, that was, as it was then called. And so then we can tease out, well, what happens if people are given access to the food stamp program? What we found was a couple of things. First is children are born healthier if their moms have access to food stamps while she's pregnant. But then because this happened so long ago, we were able to follow the children who grew up in these areas over time. And so now they're 40 and 50 years old. What we found was that we should really be thinking about food stamps as an investment in children. So we found that access to food stamps during childhood increased the likelihood that they graduated from high school by 18 percentage points. Furthermore, we were able to look at their adult outcomes, and we found that they're healthier in adulthood. And so we looked at this thing called metabolic syndrome, which is the clustered association between obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, et cetera. What we found there was more access to food in early life sets up, systems in your body to actually make you less obese in later life. Then finally, we found that, and this was particularly the case for women, that people who had access to food stamps in childhood grew up to be more economically self-sufficient. They're more likely to be employed, they had higher earnings, and they themselves, as adults, were less likely to be reliant on food stamps or welfare programs. And of course, as an economist, what I think is going on here is that the children were better able to make investments, right? They weren't going to school hungry, so they could pay attention in school better, and learn more. And so this, I think, is very important evidence that I certainly want the committee to know about, to think about this program as an investment.
Okay, so would you support a higher SNAP benefit?
Well, certainly, I think it's very important to preserve the program as it is. So that's sort of always my first worry. But then I do think, with separate evidence, that there's good evidence that increasing the benefit levels will increase the amount of healthy foods purchased, will reduce food insecurity. And of course, 1 out of every 5 children in this nation lives in a food insecure household right now. And in 9 states, it's 1 out of 4 children live in a food insecure household. I think that is too high for this great nation of ours.
Okay. So why would SNAP restrictions on soft drinks, for example, be unlikely to change consumption patterns that are shared by all Americans?
Sure. So, of course, remember that food stamp benefits are relatively modest, $4.50 per person per day. And so, if we think about an average household, which gets about $250 in food stamp benefits, and then they have to supplement their food purchases by additional cash resources. So it's $100, $150 additional. And then, on average, households spend about $12 to $14 a month on soda. Right, so $250 SNAP, $100 in cash, $12 on soda. It would be very straightforward that even if we go through all this red tape and debate what's in a soda and what's out of a soda, and is this sugar sweetener or this not, if we did that, when they got to the checkout line, they would be able to say, okay, I still want to purchase my soda, my sugar sweetened beverage, I just need to do it out of this pot of money instead of that pot of money. That's a lot of red tape to go through to not change behavior.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Mr. Yoho, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you all being here. This is such an important topic that we look to reform and make it right, both for the recipient and for the taxpayers. Ms. Saracen, one of the common arguments against restricting SNAP purchases has been the operational challenges of implementing restrictions. And if you've gone over that, I apologize, and if you haven't. With regard to the tech needed to track the restricted items, what do you see as a hold-up on that, or is there anything that we can do better legislatively, or leave you guys alone?
Well, as I mentioned in testimony, one of the things that's challenging is that our cashiers end up being, to some degree, the food police at checkout time. And as you're probably aware, that holds up a line. And if you've ever been in line behind somebody who's having a challenge like that, it's difficult. And sometimes it ends up being a difficulty with some of our most vulnerable populations. And so it becomes also a stigma and a problem in that regard. But when you're operating a business that, in general, is on a 1 to 2% annual margin, profit margin a year, every second that is delayed at the checkout line is a problem. I mean, our companies measure it because they want to keep things moving.
Right.
So I think it creates a lot of issues for us at checkout, and just the administrative function of trying to figure out what's in, what's out, as if we went into the role of trying to determine that certain things shouldn't be allowed and certain things should be allowed. It would create real havoc in our stores.
Let me ask you this, because this has been brought up to me multiple times, of having in the big retailers aisles that were restricted just to those things, so people could go right there. It would expedite them going in there, buying those products, bringing them out, and checking out with no confusion. Your thoughts on that? And then the other one is the financial impact. We hear people saying that on the retail side that this brings in X amount of dollars for us and we can't change it because we're dependent upon that. What is the pushback that you've experienced in your industry?
Well, I think the real pushback is the administrative costs of trying to actually facilitate the program. You know, one of the things that I hear regularly from our companies is that these programs are some of the most difficult for them regulatory programs for them to implement in their stores. And when you're talking about companies that have to deal with things like the Food Safety Modernization Act and all of the regulations that go along with that, if this is a more difficult challenge for them, that says a lot, I think, for what they're dealing with. And so I think, you know, the costs associated in the store with doing this on such a low margin business is significant. And not that there shouldn't be changes to the program if they are desirable and if they achieve a policy goal, but just to unilaterally identify that certain types of products should or should not be in without a real basis for making the decision is problematic for us.
Well, and you can see how important it is, as many meetings as we've had on that, and I commend Chairman Conaway and the chairman of the Nutritional Committee last year, Jackie Orleski. Let me ask one other question. This goes to Mr. Wiedemann. How is SNAP Ed reached in the rural area? And I know in the state of Florida, with the University of Florida, which is a land grant, they have an extension office in every county, 67 counties in Florida. And they seem to do a good job of doing that. Are the nutritional educational programs, are they different based on regions? Like we're in Florida, we got a hot, humid climate. How is it in your area? And then can you do a one-size-fits-all for a nutritional program for the whole nation, or should it be more regionalized?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, SNAP Ed does great work in rural and urban areas all around the country. I mentioned earlier a rural program in New Mexico, Chile, which is doing great work in pre-K and in Head Start programs. But yeah, to your point, I think the great thing about the SNAP Ed program is it does has kind of oversight and guidance to all the programs that the different states are doing, but it allows for local, on-the-ground sort of innovation so that the right type of nutrition education is happening based on region and based on the population that you're serving.
Okay, I appreciate your time. I'm out of time, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Chairman yields back. Mr. Lawson, Florida, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank all of you all who are here. I think it was, I was just thanking I'm a country boy, and so I couldn't think of anything more important on a Friday than an RSC cola and a moon pie. You know? And the other day I was in the airport in Atlanta, and I wanted to have a healthy choice, and I saw a long line at Subway, but there wasn't any lines at Bojangles. And so I tried to make the right decision, but Bojangles won out. You know, so I understand. But what I really want to say is that it appears that when they did this survey, and anyone can ask the FNS did a survey, and they said that in order to change the program, put restriction on the program, that it could cost as much as $400 million or $600 million to administer the program. And I know that would be dollars well spent if you put that in to the program. And I think people are going to do different things. And I have seen people go into these convenience stores and they'd even stand in line when they were making purchases and saw that it was very difficult and they didn't really want to be there. But what I would say to you is, and this question can go to anyone, is that in my state we have an organization like Farm Share and Frenchtown Farmer Market that carries out similar initiative to alleviate hunger. From your success with food bucks programs and with nonprofits, how can I, as a congressman, assist other food banks and various organizations to help be successful in this way and get this message out? Because you talk about the educational aspects of it, rural and urban. What can we do? Because you want to see this program continue, and I don't know whether the young people know about an RSC and a moon pie, but I want to make sure that it happens to all of us. But what can we do as legislators to help in those areas? Anyone can answer that.
Well, as I said in my testimony, I really think what was working is this comprehensive approach that includes nutrition education, and the SNAP Ed program, I think, is doing a great job at that through incentives like the new Finney program. And I really appreciate Congress for launching the Finney program. We, for years, had been hearing that, if you get the farmer's market in the neighborhood or if you get a grocery store in the neighborhood, what about price? And that can be an issue, and we've heard that today. The Finney program, I think, does a great job of both, making healthy foods more affordable and also allowing for innovation, again, at the local level in places all around the country. And then lastly, actually getting the stores located in areas so that people don't have to take 3 buses to get to the grocery store. And I really appreciate, again, the leadership of Congressman Fudge and many others on this committee for their support of the Healthy Food Financing Initiative, which is a proven model that was launched in Pennsylvania, working in partnership with the grocers and other food retailers to locate in underserved urban and rural areas, create jobs, and provide access to healthy food.
Okay, and I have one more question for is it Raskins? Saracen. What now? Saracen, okay. I'm seeing things backwards today. Dyslexic. But why in the grocery stores are all the candles and stuff right up by the cash register? It feels good to look at all of it, But I just asked that question. Once you missed it, you got it again. Once you missed it down the candy aisle, it's back up there at the cash register.
Well, I think what you'll find is that increasingly in our stores, while there are still aisles with candy right up front, increasingly there are stores that have lots of other things right up front as well. I think Mr. Wansink referred earlier to the increasing incidence of bowls of fruit and other healthy products that are available at checkout for consumers who are interested in having them. So from a retail perspective, our role is to provide the best service and create the best experience with the product lines that our customers seek and at a price that they can afford and hopefully as conveniently as possible. So that's what we strive to do for all of our customers, whether they be SNAP beneficiaries or others. And so we have this constant balance going on of trying to make sure that we're meeting all of these needs. And for some people, having a sweet treat as they walk out of the store is important. For others, it's other kinds of products. They'd rather have a piece of fruit or they'd rather have a yogurt as they walk out the door. So our goal is to try to provide a balance of products for all of our customers depending on what they're looking for.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. LaMalfa, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're today talking about the SNAP program, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Supplemental meaning in addition to what might be someone's personal income or other forms of aid a family might be receiving. Nutrition, generally thought of something that is good for the body, making you healthier, stronger. Assistance, the idea that someone else is probably paying for this to help people. So, Ms. Saracen, you talked repeatedly about how basically what a hassle this will be for stores to have the system in place to differentiate between more of these food products. So do people that come through the checkout line that are SNAP users not have other products that are ineligible for SNAP very frequently, such as house cleaning items, toiletries, other things that they are paying for that are not eligible? Is there anything that's not eligible for SNAP, I guess, that would have to cause a second transaction at the checkout counter?
Yes. Yes, there are many types of items that are
Tobacco,
not.
alcohol, like that? You talked
Alcohol,
about.
tobacco are not SNAP eligible.
Okay.
SNAP is applicable to food products.
So if you have someone in line that's making one trip to the store, they're buying all the needs for their household for the next week or two, they're buying multiple items, some are eligible, some are not.
Correct.
So if we were to have this discussion about things that are nutritional, and we have items on the list that maybe are now eligible for SNAP, but determined somehow to not be nutritional, is it really that much tougher to differentiate between soda pop and tobacco?
Well, I think the challenge is in how you're defining soda pop, or how you're defining nutrition, or how you're defining a healthy product. You know, we've had a lot of...
Shouldn't we try, because we're having all this effort made in recent years over fighting obesity and kind of differentiating between what things are contributing to obesity and what are not?
Well, I think we've had testimony this morning that has provided the evidence that doing so is going to be at great cost, and that the ultimate benefit...
It's a great cost to the people that are the assistance part of this program, and it's also a great cost to the people that are, for lack of maybe knowledge or the idea that the government is incentivizing it, sending them home with candy bars and soda pop, you know? So maybe it's worth the trouble. Let me shift to Ms. Rashidi here. Thank you for appearing as well. When we talk about the SNAP program's intention to alleviate hunger and malnutrition and permit low-income households to obtain more nutritious diet through normal sources. That's in statute. So with these aims and the idea that we're approaching nearly 10% of beverages are accounting for expenditures, as was mentioned, we don't have data to determine how the restrictions should impact the program, but we should at least try. The recent USDA study, I think, was troubling, and I think kind of a red flag for a lot of folks. A couple thoughts for you on that is, you discussed a study also that evaluated the impact of a hybrid pilot of incentives and restrictions. So do you think this could be a feasible demonstration we could take more widely for entire states, and with more cooperation from USDA, which seems to want to shut down states from making their own determination? Would please expound upon that?
Yes, I definitely think it's something that should be tested, and at the state level or the local level. Like I mentioned, we tried to do it in 2011 in New York City. The USDA at the time denied it, as they denied a few other states that have attempted to.
What do you think the USDA's incentive is to deny these possible studies and the learning we can get from that at state level or at New York City level?
Well, I think there's a general aversion to restrictions, as we've heard today, and I think that's part of it. An additional reason that was given to us was also that it's, they felt that our evaluation was not going to be rigorous enough, which we did not.
Do you think we have rigor now in separating these?
Meaning that the evaluation design was not rigorous enough, that in the end, even with an evaluation, we still wouldn't have been able to tell if it was effective or not, which we didn't necessarily agree with, but that was one of the reasons. And the other reason was what we've also heard today about the difficulties in defining what is a sweetened beverage or not. We actually came up with what we thought was a pretty clear definition, which is it excludes juice, 100% juice, and any other beverage that has 10 calories per 8 ounces is a sweetened beverage, with a few exclusions like Pedialyte, for example. But it was pretty straightforward definition.
So we have supercomputers could probably program this in at the register and not make it that tough, right?
Exactly. And we talked to retailers in New York City, and there's been other retailers that we've talked to through other efforts that have said exactly what you said. They already restrict alcoholic beverages, for example, non-food products, and this would just be one more thing to add to the list.
Yeah, thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. O'Halloran. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple of brief statements. I'll have plenty of questions by mail. But one of the statements I heard today was this pot instead of that pot. And another one was 3 buses. And my district is kind of a little bit different. It's a district the size of Pennsylvania. It has 12 Native American reservations on it. And some of the kids go to school with on a bus 2 hours one way. And it also has some of them have anywhere from a 50% to an 80% unemployment rate. And sometimes people can't get out of their homes after a big storm because of the condition of roads to get to the store. So we have the urban setting, the rural setting, and then we have these very rural settings. And I'm just trying to understand, I'm not understand, but caution us that as we look at this whole problem, that we, the cost of stores is an important aspect to me. Because in my area, stores are very far apart, obviously, and the food that's in those stores is much more limited in scope than other stores in urban areas. We also have the concern that the education level on nutrition is very low. And I appreciate the cooking classes and everything else, but it's kind of hard to get to a cooking class if you're 2 hours away from the nearest class. And so between the quality of the merchandise, the concern I have for the distances traveled, the unacceptable unemployment rates, I just want to just caution everybody when we start to think about this a little more that the entire process, and I don't think there's anybody here that doesn't care about nutrition for our families and our children. But we also have to understand the realities of life in some areas of America. Thank you. I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Dr. Marshall, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question is for Dr. Rashidi. As you may know, I'm an obstetrician and very familiar with WIC programs. Of all the things that my patients and nurses seem to think is a good thing is WIC. What can we learn from WIC that we could apply to SNAP? What makes it successful? Tell me what we're doing differently between the two programs, briefly, if you could.
Well, sure. Real briefly, I mean, WIC has a set of products that are eligible products to be purchased. And so there's a list that's put together, and it's intended to be healthy products and also to cater towards infants and, you know, new mothers and pregnant women. SNAP, on the other hand, does not have that. There are a few restrictions, as we've heard today, alcoholic beverages, non-food items, hot prepared foods, but in general, there's no restrictions on what can be purchased with SNAP benefits.
Tell us a little bit about that education, though, that's going on with those pregnant women and breastfeeding moms that WIC is doing that seems to me to be so beneficial.
Yeah, so WIC also has a large education component, and again, it's, you know, a little bit of a different program because it is focused on new mothers and infants, primarily, and young children. So it's the education efforts are very much geared towards that, but also very much geared towards nutrition. On the SNAP side, as we've also heard today, there is a nutrition and education program, and it, you know, is very different across the states. States can choose how to implement it. Some choose to have very robust programs. Some choose to have maybe not so robust but reach a lot of people. And so it's just a little bit different program than WIC.
Okay. Dr. Wansik, I guess my next question is for you. Certainly I'm concerned about health and diabetes and obesity and these things. But my question for you, is there any of the current educational or incentive-based efforts resulted in large-scale changes, in your opinion, large-scale changes in dietary habits? Is it working?
You know, I think there's something that's going on that's very good, that's been effective. And back when I was executive director for the Center for Nutrition Policy and Promotion, we kind of said, you know, this is too big of a thing for government to figure out, because government can't be where everybody purchases and prepares food everywhere they work and they play, but all of the things around us can, the companies, things like this. And we started a program called Partnering with My Pyramid. It's now called Partnering with My Plate. And the idea was to give credit and incentives to any company or any nonprofit that would help make it easier for people to move toward eating the dietary guidelines. It was tremendously successful in the last year of President Bush's term, and it still is in place, but it's not being encouraged as much as it could be. And I think that would be great because it would enlist everybody to help move people eating more toward the dietary guidelines.
Okay. I'm going to stick with this theme of lifestyle changes a little bit, and I think this is probably your question again, Dr. Wanzik. In my lifetime experiences as a physician trying to change people's lifestyles when they're pregnant seems to be their most willing to do it. I've given up trying to convince people to stop smoking unless they're pregnant or they ask me about it. Trying to make a woman, newly developed diabetes pregnancy woman, to talk to them about diet modifications, they're very motivated. They start wearing seat belts. There's reasons that this woman is motivated for lifestyle changes. Number one, so why are they so motivated, and how can we apply that to SNAP as well? I just think that pregnant women, by the time they're 45, it's too late. But when they're 21, there's opportunities here. So help me with, what's the next step for SNAP to take?
I think that's an outstanding question because what you're looking at there is somebody who's doing something for a bigger cause than themselves. And we see this with people making changes in their diet too. They'll do it for a bigger cause. They'll become a vegetarian for a bigger cause, but not for their health. And I think in trying to apply some of these things to SNAP benefits, maybe what we need to do is we need to start focusing on the impact this has on a person's family or on their children and start talking about SNAP benefits, not in terms of, I was going to buy some groceries, but on the implication this has on their family. And I love the stats that you had about what happens with graduation rates going up by 18% for kids in SNAP benefits.
Yep. I'm sorry to catch up, but I appreciate the answer. The number one, my biggest concern is lack of activity as opposed to calories in. I think that's the biggest problem with obesity. Do any of you, are we doing anything with SNAP related to encouraging activity as opposed to playing video games all day? Is anyone, my time's out, sorry. I yield back.
Jim yields back. Mr. Panetta, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. And thanks to all the witnesses who are here. I appreciate your testimony, your preparation. I know it took quite a bit of time, I'm sure, to put together your statements today. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. My question kind of stems around education. As my members are starting to know, and as many people do know, I come from the salad bowl of the world. They're on the central coast of California. But we're looking to change that name, actually. We're going to call it the salad bar of the world. And no, I'm serious. And the reason they're doing that is because a lot of the growers and the shippers, what they realized is that the people who work for them weren't eating the same foods that they're picking. And they realized how to get to them is by getting to their kids. And so what a lot of our ag companies have done have donated salad bars, over 100, to the local schools to start getting our children, including my 2 daughters, to start eating more healthy foods, having that salad bar option, and they're doing that. And what they're seeing is that when their children start to eat more at schools, those trends, they go home and their parents start to develop those same trends, and it's actually working to a certain extent. And so my question is how do we continue, besides ag companies donating salad bars to our schools, how do we continue to educate our children when it comes to getting them to eat healthier in our schools? How do we do that?
A couple of things that the food retailers are working on. One is a very high percentage of our companies do in-store tours. I mentioned earlier that about 95% of them have on-staff nutritionists and dietitians. And what they're doing is actually bringing school groups into the stores. And the nutritionists and the dietitians take the children through the store and help them understand about nutrition, help them understand the kinds of nutrients and vitamins they get from various products and the balance that they need to be trying to achieve in their lives. So that's one thing that I think has worked well and will continue to work well. Another thing that we've done at FMI through our FMI Foundation is we've just had our 2nd annual National Family Meals Month. in September. And the notion of National Family Meals Month is sort of multifold. One is that some of the societal challenges we have are improved by having more frequent family meals. And I'm talking now about school truancy, underage drinking, drug abuse, et cetera. The research shows that more family meals tends to bring down the incidences with young children and teenagers. But in addition to that, what we find is that children who engage with their families at mealtime, both by cooking, by purchasing the food, by being involved in preparation and serving, they tend to have a better understanding of nutrition and diet and health than those that don't. So we're promoting National Family Meals within our organization, but also at store level. And we've had, as I mentioned, our second annual in September of 16. So this is something that we're doing on an annual basis so that our retailers can actually be engaged with their customers in helping children engage more with the preparation of food in their homes.
I appreciate it. With the FENI programs and the SNAP Ed program, what do those entail?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we work in 100 schools in Pennsylvania, and we doing SNAP Ed nutrition education work. So teaching kids to try new foods. A lot of it is also peer-to-peer marketing. So getting kids to be leaders in changing their school environment, youth-led wellness councils. And you really find that when the students are kind of marketing to their peers around healthier eating, that has a big impact. We also do, to the Congressman's point, we work with our Get Hype Philly program is about healthy eating and exercise. So the combination of both those is really important.
Great, great. In regards to Dr. Wansink, excuse me, you talked about middle of the road consumers. You mentioned signs, service structure. Is there anything else we can do to target them? I mean, what else can we do?
Well, what can be done at a retail level is to make sure that the foods we want to guide them for, let's say the healthier foods, end up being the ones that are most convenient to purchase, they're most attractive purchase, not just by price, but attractive looking, attractively named, attractively positioned, and then that are also more normal. Because right now, it's just not normal to buy a lot of healthy things in the grocery store because you feel like you're kind of a strange person. Simply a lot of placement changes can make a big difference. Thank you very much for your questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Too much time, you're back. Mr. Fazzo, excuse me, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm intrigued by we had a table here that came from USDA. It suggests in 2011 that there were approximately $6 billion of purchases of sweetened beverages in 2011. I don't know how many, do any of the witnesses have an idea how many how much of that $6 billion would be what we call soda in the East and my colleagues like Ms. Hartzler call pop? In the West, although in Western New York they do call soda pop.
I believe it's a little more than half.
A little more than half.
Yeah.
And would any of the witnesses contend to me that soda, sweetened soda, has nutritional value? So I guess this would be for Dr. Schanzenbach and maybe Dr. Rashidi as well. What would be the, and I take it by no answer that any of the witnesses had, that no one believes that soda has nutritional value. What would be the problem with especially if we're looking at more than $3 billion of taxpayer money going to buy something that no one, as far as I can tell, believes has nutritional value, what would be the issue in your mind of a carefully designed study by the USDA to actually analyze this question as to whether if we had a restriction on certain sugared beverages that it could result in altered buying habits and dietary consequences and nutritional consequences for the families, particularly the children who live in those households where that $3 billion of taxpayer money is spent to buy soda.
So you're asking a researcher if we should have more research? Yeah. And the answer is, right, that's the first thing they teach you in grad school is, yes, I would welcome any sort of a demonstration program, but I would be quick to add that it needs to be high quality. And so in particular, that includes it needs to be a real randomized controlled trial, and then it also needs to do a couple of other things. One, it needs to measure consumption, not just compliance, but how does this change what people consume? Because some of the research out there that maybe looks at the impact of soda taxes and other things like that show that people substitute away from soda in sometimes, but what they replace it with isn't necessarily much better.
Right. And so how many people do you think would be appropriate in such a study?
Oh, boy. I can't do power calculations on the fly. I'd be happy to submit something.
Perhaps you could submit
I'd be happy to.
for the record. And Ms. Saracen, at the risk of getting my friends in the food merchants and my friend Mike Rosen in Albany upset, the fact is that the merchants already, now that SNAP benefits are in an EBT form, by and large, for the vast majority of those purchases, and the merchants are able to differentiate among taxable items and non-taxable items. We had an issue in New York State for years where certain marshmallows that were used, if you put them on a stick and you roasted them over the fire, those were tax exempt. But if you bought the small marshmallows, those were taxable. And this, I realize the administrative complexity argument, but it does seem to me that we're now at a point where we could be able to more readily differentiate, just as we do with tobacco and beer. You can't buy that with food stamps.
Well, as I said in my testimony, could it be done? Yes, probably so. The question is at what cost? And is the cost of trying to put together a means through which to define the products that are in clearly, define the products that are out clearly, such that electronically they could be contained in a system and therefore would be able electronically to be able to segregate? Absolutely, that would certainly help. But again, we're talking about many tens of thousands of products right. that would have to be done every year, and the infrastructure to be able to make those determinations.
So I guess my point would be that we have these wonderful academic researchers and experts. Perhaps we could design a study that was statistically valid and which considered the difficulty that the food merchants have, but also get to the core of the fact that, when we were kids, the only time we ever had soda or pop was when it was someone's birthday. And when I see $6 billion, perhaps $3 billion of taxpayer dollars being spent on soda, which has no nutritional value, in a program that's called Supplemental Nutrition Assistance, something is wrong. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Soto, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In Florida, we have our Fresh from Florida program, which has tried to cue in local farmers with our schools, which has had some pretty good success. Listening to your testimony, it appears most of you are encouraging us to have incentives, to have a carrot rather than a stick, I guess pun intended on that, and to have greater access, to focus on food deserts rather than desserts. And I agree with both those things. I did, however, read a Washington Post article this morning that went right into this issue, and they had a conclusion that a SNAP purged of sodas or candy or both could be less vulnerable to cuts, and supporters can seek full funding, and that every dollar for SNAP would help nourish the poor just as Congress intended. And it got me thinking first, how many of you, by a show of hands, would support a ban on soda and candy? Go ahead. How many of you? Okay, we have one. How many of you believe that it would save money if we banned these two products? Raise your hand. Okay. And so I think that's what my main quandary is now, is whether or not the real goal is to have these sorts of bans to get people to eat healthier, or whether the real goal would be to try to save money to expand a lot of the pilot programs that you all have discussed. And, I'm one who doesn't want food police or a big brother society or any of these other things that we're all so worried about. And so it'd be great in the time I have remaining for you all to either support or not the concept of whether this would save money and why. And I'd like to hear from all of you on it.
Well, I guess I'll start. In terms of saving money, I mean, I think just, the opportunity or the potential to save medical-related expenses, especially on the public health side, Medicaid, Medicare, I think that that's definitely there's potential there. And then,
excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt. Just with regard to the SNAP program, whether we'd save money in SNAP funds.
right. Well, I think, I don't know if this is exactly what you're getting at, but in terms of the article this morning, again, I look at it as a program integrity issue. I think it's difficult to talk about expanding SNAP benefits, for example, when you know that 10% of SNAP benefits are spent on sweetened beverages, which have no nutritional value and do nothing to further the goals of the program.
I think that this won't save SNAP dollars. In fact, I think, as I testified earlier, it will increase the administrative cost of the program to no benefit. My professional opinion as an economist, I don't think it's going to change behavior.
And as I've said before, I don't think it's going to save money either. I think the administrative costs associated with making these determinations in the context of USDA would be astronomical.
We recommend an approach of encouraging access to healthy food, incentives, and nutrition education. And we think that approach is the best way to create jobs, lift people out of poverty so they don't need SNAP, and reduce healthcare costs.
I think there's easier ways to get at that objective, and I don't think just cutting that's going to have the benefits we want.
Now, my next question is, what would be the administrative costs, knowing that we already ban alcohol, and that seems to be something that hasn't mushroomed cost?
When I hear the discussion about how it would the cost would be astronomical, I don't quite understand how that could be with items, for example, like sweetened beverages that are very straightforward. I understand moving more towards a WIC model, how that could potentially increase administrative costs, but the things that I'm talking about, I don't see how that would increase administrative costs.
And this is a reference just to a ban on candy and soda, no other items.
So I guess I would add to that, restricting alcoholic beverages, that's sort of a different product category, and it's real easy for the person who's checking you out to know, oh, this is a bottle of wine and not something else. But when it comes to something like sugar-sweetened beverages, I think what we saw in the New York pilot proposal was it's really hard to decide how to define this. So, for example, two, what I would call similar beverages, V8 was you could still purchase, but V8 Splash, which is the same sort of thing, but it's got a little kiwi fruit in it, was not eligible. So I think that it gets to something that's very complicated at the store, and I think it's going to cause confusion. Do we have great estimates of how much it'll cost? I think we have some evidence from the Healthy Incentives pilot that maybe $5 billion a year, something like that.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Arrington, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I admittedly come to the table to discuss this with tension between the consumer's freedom to choose what they purchase to eat and our responsibility as stewards of taxpayer money to guide in the most responsible way. And I must say I'm undecided, quite frankly. And I'm sorry I couldn't get all your testimonies and be a part of the discussion. I had another hearing. So, Dr. Rashidi, I understand that you ran the SNAP program for New York City and that you requested a waiver so that you could apply restrictions to people on SNAP and their purchases. Why were you denied that flexibility?
And just to be clear, I didn't run the program, but I was the director for policy, and so we proposed the restriction. But ultimately, what we were told in terms of being denied was related to the evaluation design, and that it wasn't rigorous enough to be able to conclude whether a restriction would be effective or not. And that was the main reason that was given. And then, given that other states in the past had also proposed similar things, we suspected it was just a general aversion to wanting to do any type of restrictions.
Have they granted? Go ahead.
If I could, just one comment that I don't think has been mentioned today, and I think is worth mentioning in the context of waivers for various reasons. This committee, several years ago, under the leadership of Mr. Goodlatte, spent an awful lot of time and energy working toward an state-by-state interoperability type of process with SNAP. In this mobile society that we're in right now, there has been the need for SNAP recipients to be able to use their benefits where they find themselves. And so with EBT cards, et cetera, that's been facilitated. So these waivers, I think, have created a tension within USDA as well, because once you start doing waivers piecemeal around the country, the interoperability that this committee spends so much time trying to achieve is compromised.
When's the last time the USDA has granted a waiver for such restrictions?
They have not.
Ever? Okay. Yes.
But I think if you wanted to do a real demonstration project, we would just really need to make sure that it's set up so that we can learn something from it, and not only studying the impact on consumption, which, as you know, I have a prediction what that'll be,
Yeah.
but also the impact on retailers and other forms.
Yeah, I
So
think that's
it's going to cost you if you'd like to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, and I think that's fair to include all stakeholders. But so with states bearing much of the cost in healthcare, or let's just say significant cost for healthcare of their citizens, why not enter another freedom to choose? Why not block grant SNAP, let states choose if they want to go higher with support and supplemental support, and work any reforms they want in on work requirements and other reforms that have been discussed, not for this hearing. And then let them decide if they find it useful and meaningful to restrict purchases based on the nutritional value. Let states do that. Has that been discussed, and what are your thoughts about that?
So my grave concern around a potential block grant is that one of the things that makes SNAP most successful, especially to the broader economy, is that it is designed to respond quickly to changing economic conditions and to times of needs. So the program, as you saw during the Great Recession, expanded in response to the greater need that we saw. It is starting to come back down as the economy is starting to get a foothold. You may be aware that the dollars that we spend in SNAP also, they're very promptly spent, and they're spent in the local communities, and so they provide an economic stimulus to the whole area. So, you know, for every dollar that we spend, I think at the height of the Great Recession, we got $1.74 in local economic activity because of this. I think a block grant takes that important aspect of this program off the table. I think would be a mistake.
So it seems to me that in terms of who's more nimble, the federal government, a federal program, or a state and local government and program, I'm going to put my money on the state and local programs. In terms of nimbleness, I don't think we have anything to compare it to with respect to this specific program, but I bet there are other ways to compare it. I'm running out of time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Evans. Mr. Evans, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one question that I have, and maybe Olive can deal with this, is my inquiry is, what is the impact of reduction in SNAP would mean for retailers from a job perspective? Can someone shed light on the impact as jobs and reduction in SNAP would create?
One of the things that we've been doing around the country since we started in Pennsylvania with the Fresh Food Financing Initiative is convening groups that include grocers but other stakeholders around the issue of access to healthy food and grocery store access. You know, that's one thing that we heard loud and clear, is that in order to have a successful enterprise in low-income communities, SNAP has become a very critical component there. So in our view, reductions to SNAP is not only going to result in more hunger and less, food on the table for American families who are struggling with hard times, but it's going to have an economic effect. And oftentimes grocery stores are the anchor in a community. So if the grocery store closes down, that can have a domino effect affecting other retail in the community. This happens in rural, small towns and urban neighborhoods.
Is anybody I think you were the national retail, able to quantify it in some way, what you think it means in terms of numbers?
Oh, sure. During normal economic times, every dollar that we spend on SNAP returns about $1.25 to the local area. So I would think the way to think about it during normal economic times, although this would be worse during downturns, but during normal economic times, if we took $1 away from SNAP, we would expect to see a reduction of $1.25 in local economic activity.
Can each of you shed light from your perspective on what a SNAP benefit impact would be on recipients?
Sure. I think we've got strong predictions that certainly if benefits were reduced, we would see, I would predict that we would see an increase in food insecurity. Currently 1 out of every 5 children in this great nation lives in a food insecure household. I also think that, just the opposite of what I talked about before, having fewer dollars to spend at the grocery store means that people are going to substitute towards cheaper forms of calories. And that's exactly the opposite of the direction that we'd like to see people go. We'd like to see people eat healthier foods, which tend to be more expensive per calorie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman yields back. Mr. Allen, 5 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the reason I'm the last one to ask questions is I was in a conference meeting this morning talking about the spiraling cost of health care in this country. And as I looked at statistically at the growth of this program from 17 million people in 2000 to over 40 million people today, and the fact that this program was initially started because during World War II, because our military, our generals felt like they didn't have the nourishment that they needed to battle the enemy. So we've seen tremendous growth in this program, and then we see tremendous growth in the cost of health care. So we're talking about nutrition, and then what is that doing to health care? Do we have any studies that tell us, okay, are they related? And if they're related, how do we fix this?
To be sure, that obesity rates have skyrocketed, not just among the poor, but all across the distribution. And there are studies, we could nitpick them, but I think common sense dictates that this increase in obesity that we've seen across the income distribution has real ramifications for cost of health care.
How do we, obviously the retailers have a stake in this. The producers, our farmers, obviously have a stake in this. We've talked about some options here available to us, but it sounds like to me we better fix this problem, because when you look, for example, at Medicaid cost, it's skyrocketing. And the number of people on Medicaid is skyrocketing. And it's because folks are having health problems because of, it may be other factors, but I think a large part of it is nutrition. Doctor, would you like to comment on what your thoughts are? How do we fix this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, of all the health concerns that we face, diet-related disease and obesity are the only ones that we can deal with and change immediately.
Right.
Now, you bring a great point that most grocery stores, maybe they don't really care that much about the health of the shops who are there. And to use a health motivation to try to encourage them to get people to buy more fruits and vegetables wouldn't be the right way to do it. But instead, it is aligned in their interest to get more people to buy fresh fruits and vegetables, lean meat and dairy, things like this, because when that stuff goes bad, they actually lose money. Okay, the margin on it might be thin at the register, but the loss is huge compared to Fruity Pebbles if they don't sell it. And I think being able to show them that these are easy ways that we can help you get that stuff moving through your store is going to be a win-win situation, just like it was with convenience stores when the Association for Convenience Stores started giving their members ways that they could accelerate the sales of healthy foods.
I'm sure you'd like to respond to that.
Yes, I would like to respond to that. Thank you. I think the notion that that food retailers don't care about the health of their customers is just incorrect. It's just incorrect. Just not factually correct. Of course, we care about the health of our customers, and of course, we're doing things to try to enhance the health of our customers, and we do that every single day. And in my longer testimony, there are multiple examples of the things that we do in store, in our communities, and across the board to try to make sure that we're doing everything we can to meet the needs of our customers. While the convenience stores are relatively new to this process and apparently are doing some good things, that's wonderful, but your broadline grocers have been engaged in this process for decades in trying to assist their customers in meeting their dietary needs. And they do it by bringing in nutritionists and dietitians and other professionals in the store to work with their customers on a daily basis to meet those needs. And we'll continue to do so.
And of course, we've got the food deserts that we have to deal with now. We had testimony here with Amazon.com, which is becoming a big player in the grocery market. I mean, obviously, we've got to come up with a solution to this issue, and so thank you for your help here today, and hopefully we can get our arms around this and solve this problem.
Gentleman's time has expired. I want to thank our witnesses. The great news about this committee is this is a terrific example of it, today's hearing. If you took the names off the questions and the comments made, you'd be hard-pressed to determine which were Republicans and which were Democrats. Great information. The panel has given us terrific information to chew on. This is not the last conversation we'll have about that. I've got some folks who feel really strongly about both sides, and the committee will work its will when we get to this point in place, but this is an important conversation to have had today. Incredibly respectful, and I appreciate everybody the way they did it. And I wish more of our work here in the House was as nonpartisan as this is. Not a person here doesn't care about nutrition. Not a person here doesn't care that people eat healthy and that they exercise. They make good decisions. I was particularly informed by the triangle from Mr. Wansock. I wish it was reversed. I wish the food vigilant, health vigilant, were the big piece, and that the food or the health the ones who don't care was the smaller piece of that triangle. But I think that's correct. I think there are far more people in America who really don't care. And then that group that we can hit, folks that can change their habits. It's a convenience issue. It's a opportunity to have their kids tell them to do it. So this program is important, and what they spend on it is important. I'm not convinced that the more decisions we make on people's behalf doesn't make them less capable of making good decisions on their own. So it's an education. Somebody said in your testimony there is no silver bullet to fixing this issue. Sugar drinks have a clear impact on people's health, but if we eliminated those off the face of the earth, I don't know that obesity rates would be any different than they are right now. There's some other systemic changes that have to go on in people's choices and the way they conduct their lives to make this happen. So under the rules of the committee, the record of today's hearing will remain open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplementary written responses from the witnesses to any question posed by a member. This hearing on the Committee of Agriculture is adjourned. Thank you.